Screens are the most common action you'll see in either the NBA or in 2K. They can be devastatingly effective, though they can also be difficult to utilize effectively. In this video, I'll be talking about the basics of screens before talking about how they can be used on offense and how to set an effective screen. Later, I'll be making a video on how to defend against them. Screens have been in the game for decades, and while you can sometimes get stops on individual plays, the action itself has too many variables to be able to guard it 100% of the time. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you can, this one trick and you'll defend all the screens. But we will talk about some different ways that you might not have thought of before, might not have known about. But as I said, this video will cover the basics and then jump into how you can utilize them on offense. Do note that I won't really be talking about meta and having PGs shoot off the screen, as there are probably a lot of videos about that already, and most people already know about it. With that being said, let's get into it. Screens are used for three main reasons. First, they give the ball handler space from their primary defender. This leaves the ball handler with some options. They can attack the basket, go for a mid-range, or stop and pop from three. Because of this additional space, sometimes the screener's defender will switch onto and defend the ball handler. This is the second reason why teams screen, to force a switch, meaning a big will guard a guard, and a guard will have to guard a big. The final reason teams set screens is to force the defense to make decisions. In this first clip, we see the Heat switch, leaving Murray wide open for three when Bam now has to cover him. In the second clip, they try to stick with their men, meaning that Jokic can get a head of steam before heading to the basket. Now that we've got into the very basics of screens, let's get a little more specific, starting with the pick and roll. The pick and roll is the basketball play. It's been in the league for decades. It will continue to be in the league. You'll see it in basically every game from street ball all the way up to the NBA Finals, right? Most of you probably already know what this is, but I'm going to go into the details real quick. So for this case, I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to use 1 as the ball handler, 3 as the screener, and then 1's defender, and then 3's defender. 3 is going to set the pick, the screen. So they're going to come out and set a screen, and what this does is, is 1's defender is now going to either run into the screen, or they have to try and get around it, going this way, or potentially going this way. Now, for the purposes of our argument, we're just going to say they kind of get bumped on the screen. Meanwhile, the ball handler is going to go dribbling over here to get on the other side of the screen. So this is the first part of the pick and roll. This is the pick. And we can see once we go next, now 3 is going to be is going to be matched up with 1 because 1 wasn't able to get over the screen, and 3's defender now has to step up and get and defend the 1. Now, the roll part of it is when 3 cuts to the basket. And the idea here is that 1, if they did switch, 1 is going to be severely disadvantaged in size and not necessarily speed, but certainly in size. This makes a relatively easy pass to the basket, potentially even a lob. So we have the pick, the initial screen, and then we have the roll. So here we'll see what happens. We'll get to see an illustration of the play. So 3 goes, sets the screen, 1 is unable to get behind it, and then which leads us to the next part where 3 now has this mismatch. They have lane, whatever else. They're able to get in. Remember, 1 is likely much smaller than them, and we have an easy pass into the paint for a potential easy score. Now, there is a bit of a wrinkle to this that we might see, and it might look like something like this. So this happens relatively as the way it did in the other play, where 1 gets screened and 3 now picks up the ball handler. But instead, we're going to imagine that 1's defender is going to fight around the screen and try and get back to 1. This is fine, but Defender 3 now has to stick on 1 long enough for Defender 1 to get back to him. This leaves 3 open to cut to the rim, which means that 3's defender is now going to be quite a bit behind him, or even a little bit behind him. That's enough for a pass to be made and an advantage to be had. Here, we see Capella set a screen for Harden. Both defenders stick on Harden, and now Capella is free to roll to the rim for a wide open dunk. Similarly, even though the guard recovers well onto Chris Paul, because Steven Adams has to guard him for just a fraction of a second, Biyombo is able to slip behind for a layup. The most important part of running the pick and roll is that the ball handler is decisive. If they're going to pass it to the cutting big, then they need to make sure to make that pass as soon as they can. This ensures that the big has momentum and will get it in rhythm underneath the basket. Pass it too early and they might have to dribble. Pass it too late, they're already underneath the basket and the defender has recovered. Of course, if you can't pass it to the cutting big, then the ball handler can look for their own shot or move on to the next action. The next type of screenplay I want to talk about is the pick and pop. In a pick and pop, the screener sets a screen, but rather than roll to the basket, the screener flares out to the three-point line. This is known as the pop. The pick and pop is set up almost exactly like the regular pick and roll. 3 comes to set a screen for 1's man, and we have this similar situation where 1 dribbles to the other side of the screen. Defender 3 now has to pick up to make sure that the ball handler doesn't get a shot off, and Defender 1 is going to try and recover onto his man to get back to 1. 3, rather than cutting to the basket, rather than rolling to the basket, 3 is going to pop or fade out to the three-point line. At the same time, 1 dribbles to the right, which means that Defender 3 must stay where they are, otherwise they concede a wide open shot at the basket or a wide open 3, as 1 is still recovering. However, this means the 3, the big, is wide open. 1 can make the pass here, and because they can make the pass faster than the defense can rotate, this leads to a wide open shot for 3 by the big. Here, Jokic sets a screen for Murray, but rather than roll to the basket, Jokic kind of stays out beyond the three-point line and is wide open for the 3. Similarly, because both defenders stay with me, 5, 6, 7 is wide open for a 3. Of course, off a screen, the ball handler can either shoot a 3 or drive to the basket for their own shot. Those actions, the pick and roll, pick and fade, and shot off the screen, are the most common actions you'll see with screens in 2K. I did want to highlight 2 other concepts that could be very useful in adding wrinkles to your game: off-ball screens and slipping the screen. As the name implies, off-ball screens happen off-ball, meaning the screener does not set a screen for the ball handler. Instead, like in this case, 3 is going to set a screen on 2's defender. So 2 is sitting in the corner, and 3 sets what is called a flare screen. What this is designed to do is it's designed to let 2 flare out get closer to the ball, get farther away from their defender. Three's defender has to cut back to stop any kind of drive to the rim. And what this does is once 2's defender gets caught up on the screen, it leaves 2 wide open, and now 2 has a wide open shot. 2 and 3 can try and get back, but they cannot recover in time. So that's a flare screen. The other type of screen, off-ball screen that we see, is called a backdoor screen. In this action, the screener goes to set a screen onto 2's man, but rather than playing it up here, playing it high, they set it closer to the baseline. And what this does is it means that if 2 cuts behind, either 3 has to switch on to 2, in which case we get a mismatch. Remember, mismatches are good. Or 3 might be too slow or not switch in time, and that leaves 2 wide open underneath the basket. In this next play, the big sets a screen for the off-ball player. The off-ball player curls and runs to the rim. Even though the screen doesn't actually make contact with the defender has to navigate around it and is now far enough back that the 2 gets a wide open shot at the rim. In this clip, the 2 sets the screen for the 3 in what is sometimes called an inverted screen. The 3 flares out to the left side, and even though it takes a second for the shot animation to go through, the shot is pulled off in the end, and the bucket is scored. In both of these examples, you'll notice that the screener doesn't actually make contact with the person that they're screening. This is okay. Just being in the way, giving an obstacle for a defensive player to have to navigate around, can be as effective as a screen. In a similar vein, faking setting a screen can be just as effective as actually setting one. This is called slipping the screen. In this play, Durant motions as if he's going to set a screen, but rather than wait for the defender to make contact, he stops setting the screen and cuts to the basket for a shot at the rim. Slipping a screen can be very effective because the defense is thinking and anticipating that you will be setting the screen. So you can surprise them by bursting out of it, leading to more advantages. In this next clip, the 2 comes to set the screen. Notice how the defender immediately overplays, anticipating either running into the screen or some type of switch. The screener notices this and then goes to the corner rather than waiting for his man to make contact with him. This leads to a wide open 3. In this last clip, you'll see my man go to set a screen. I, being lazy, just stand on the other side ready to pick up the ball handler once the ball handler crosses over. Instead, my man goes into the paint and has a wide open dunk, and I cannot react fast enough. The last thing I wanted to go over in this video is how to set a screen itself. Now, it might seem pretty easy to do right off the bat because all you do is you just hold B. However, setting an effective screen requires a little bit more of thought going into it. You've probably seen what I've seen, and that's when somebody goes and stands in one spot, either in the middle of the court, at the top of the arc, or whatnot, and holds the screen before the ball handler has even crossed half court. While this can telegraph to the ball handler what's going to happen, and that can be helpful in its own way, it also telegraphs to everybody else exactly what you're going to do. Rather than do this, I recommend what I would call either a running back screen or a Gortat screen. In this sense, rather than just going and standing in a corner and being a pylon around which the ball handler and defenders navigate, instead, you're running up, making contact with the defender, and then initiating the screen. This ensures that you will make contact with the defender and open up some space for the ball handler. In this clip, I start running as if I'm going to go to the corner, but instead I turn around and I go to set a screen. Notice how I do not actually start holding the screen until I make contact with the defender. This ensures that if they move at all, they are going to hit the screen. Same thing here. I don't just stand stationary at mid-court holding the screen. I run up to the person I'm screening, and then I hold the screen as soon as I touch him, right when I stop moving. As I mentioned earlier, it's really important that the ball handler is decisive on the screen action. However, it's almost just as important that the screener be decisive as well. A screener just standing still can completely clog things up. Instead, as a screener, you want to be aware of your options. If the defender doesn't make contact with your initial screen, then pop, or cut, or just get out of the way. Either way, you do not want to remain stationary for too long. If your first screen fails, alright, it fails. You have to move. This allows for the offense to reset or move into a different action. Screens can, of course, get much more complicated. There are a whole lot of concepts, including double screens and inverse screens and pin downs, that I don't really cover in this video. However, I hope just kind of learning these basics and their terminology and what they all look like can help improve your game. Remember, the most important thing is to be decisive. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. Be on the lookout for my next longer video, which will be focusing on defending screens. And hopefully it won't take me quite so long to do this one. If you're interested in joining a mostly PC 2K Discord, then feel free to check out the link either in the description or in the comments below.